Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Surah Al-Baqarah chapter 8 verses 30 to 38 will be covered today. 9 verses. And these verses cover story of Adam, that is man and woman, Malaika, Iblees, Shaitan, and the importance of the Quran in terms of providing guidance. These are the references, and especially this reference, the meanings of the Quran, volume 2, covers these verses in a lot of detail. And hopefully this volume will be published shortly. This is our contact. Let us go to the first verse of today, verse 30 of Surah Al-Baqarah. The creation of Adam, that is man and mankind, with choice and intent. Malaika point to the unbridled outlook of Adam. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. We have gone through this verse in our previous presentation, in which we covered a lot of detail on human self and associated aspects. When life, traversing its evolutionary stages, reached the human form, and according to the program of Mashiach, that is the program of Allah, that moment arrived that man inhabits the earth in place of the former habitations. Quran has called the arrival of man that he is Khalifa, that is, he is the successor of the previous habitations on the planet Earth. The universal forces called Malaika in the Quran were astonished because before this there was no such creation in the universe which could dare to go against the laws of Allah. But this latest creation was being made the possessor of choice and intent, and that is the beauty of this creation called Adam, which meant that he, that is man, could also disobey the laws of Allah. Hence, they, that is the Malaika, respectfully submitted that, O Allah, what kind of creation is this which is being settled on earth? Which was obvious, and it is in a very interesting question form where Malaika ask that this creation is going to create some kind of problems on the planet. He will rebel against your law, whose consequence will be inequities and bloodshed. Contrary to this, we are those who, whatever duties are assigned to us, always remain busy in the accomplishment of these, and we go to whatever extent is required in order to make your programs the cause for praise, admiration, and glorification. At this, the creator of the universe, that is Allah, declared that you cannot understand this latest program of ours. We know all this. Now, we have gone through this aspect previously as well, that we can take this verse, what is stated in it, metaphorically as well as in reality. Because as we can see, if it needs a bit of imagination on our part, that Malaika, that is the universal forces, are presently witnessing what is noted in this verse. That is the word of 2025 can be the representation of what Malaika have said over here. Further elaboration of this verse, creation of Adam and its implications. This verse points to a number of aspects related to the appearance of Adam on planet Earth. And we should keep in mind that when we talk of Adam, it means both men and women and whole of mankind. It is not any particular individual to which the Quran has referred to over here. Firstly, Malaika, who possess no choice and intent, express their opinion that a creation which possesses this trait is going to create an imbalance on the planet, since they were not yet aware of the presence of the latent potentials in Adam. Man possessing choice and intent is going to create imbalance, bloodshed, and chaos on the planet, which is highlighted here in this verse. قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. And we know the meanings of fasad, and over here is also shedding blood, which refers to creating chaos, wars, and conflicts. Allah does not deny this, and that is an important aspect, that Allah does not deny this, that man is not going to do this, and instead counters the earlier opinion of the Malaika by stating, Qala inni alamu ma la ta'lamun. He, that is Allah, said, I know what you know not. What is that which Malaika do not know? And that is an important question for us to figure out at our own by following through these verses. From the definition of ilm, that is knowledge, we know that when some information is converted into knowledge, we come to terms with many aspects which our intellect and reasoning help to unravel. Malaika do not have the ability of ilm. So this particular trait belongs to, which Allah has referred to himself, also belongs to man within his finite capacity. Understanding this verse leads us to recognizing the word which becomes created by the human intellect when it is devoid of the guidance of the Quran, i.e. the Wahi of Allah. Now we go to the next verse, 31. The limitation of Malaika highlighted. Adam is also informed about his latent potentials. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ فَقَالَ أَنْبِئُونِي بِأَسْمَاءِ هَؤُلَاءِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. So the next verse goes over to that side of the question, that what Allah knows, and now Allah is explaining that aspect. This latent potential was placed in man that he could obtain knowledge of those laws according to which different things of the universe are busily functioning. Hence, it was said to those universal forces that if you are true in your opinion that this latest creation is inferior as compared to you, then speak. Do you possess this ability? Highlighting the difference between a human being and the Malaika. Here a major potential of Adam is highlighted, which points to the ability to characterize various things of the universe and to recognize them by allocating various names to them which are related to their properties to be discovered by man. And this is an important characteristic of Adam, that he can characterize things which Malaika cannot. We are cognizant of this human ability to name things based on their properties and are also aware of the inquisitiveness of the human intellect to discover these properties with a view to benefit from the things of the universe. And we can see that whatever discoveries, whatever inventions are being made in the world of today, all of these are given some kind of name. And behind that name, we can figure out the properties of those things. All the research and development which is ongoing in the world owes itself to this trait of Adam, which is noted in this verse. Because human beings recognize these properties through the names they have given to them. So names are as reference points for everything. Even human beings' own identification carries some kind of a name. Otherwise, we are all just equal human beings. The verse also refers to the inability of the Malaika to display this ability, i.e. these forces do not possess choice and intent and simply cannot characterize the things of the universe. And that is where the differentiation lies. Malaika do not have choice and intent, and Malaika cannot characterize things. They are just things themselves. They are entities in their own right, but they do not possess all those characteristics which human beings possess. And another point will become clear subsequently, that is the use of these Malaika. As noted in verse 230, they execute their functions as programmed by Allah. By stating at the end of the verse, in kuntum sadiqeen, man is instructed to know the character of everything and come to terms with its true reality. So over here it will mean that man is told that whatever you do in your life, you must go through it in detail and find out the reality of everything with which you deal during your finite life. Next is confession of Malaika, Alim and Hakim highlighted. This verse is Qalu subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. At this, they, that is these universal forces, lowered their head in humility and said that your programs are far beyond the limits of our perception, because they themselves form part of that program, whereas man has been given a far bigger program as compared to others. We only know that about which the knowledge is placed within us. The potential for finding out more than this is not available to us. You have full knowledge of the universe, and only you are fully cognizant of the aim and purpose of your own program. And that is another important point over here, which is carried in Al-Alimul Hakim, that we should know the program of Allah, which is based on knowledge and hikmat. That means we also acquire knowledge and hikmat. Verse 32, further elaboration. Continuing on from the previous verse, it is made clear here that the Malaika simply cannot make any decision and do not possess any abilities to make decisions, i.e., they possess no choice and intent. They carry out their assigned tasks as programmed in order to accomplish the program of Allah. And there is a beauty over here implicit for us, that we should also not behave as if we have already been programmed. We should use our choice and intent so that we are quite different from the things of the universe, because being human means that we should be inquisitive and we should gain knowledge and also understand the hikmat of that knowledge. Since they function as part of the divine program, hence knowledge about their roles is accessible to man. And in today's world, the developed nations have benefited from this by harnessing many of the forces of nature. So while we are going through these verses, we should also see the world around us and where these things are applicable and what we have observed so far and the things to which the Quran is pointing our attention to in the light of the Quranic guidance. These forces have been placed at the disposal of man during his finite stay on this planet. Man needs to employ these to fulfill the program of Allah as noted in the Quran. Here the Quran makes it clear to us that these forces are to be utilized as per the program of Allah, which is defined in the Quran, for the discovery of these forces and then utilizing them for our benefit. We have been provided with all the necessary potentials and abilities. The verse concludes by noting two divine attributes, Innaka Antal Alimul Hakim. Alim and Hakim means that we need knowledge as well as reasoning in order to obtain the best from this acquired knowledge. And we know that the Quran itself explains the hikmat, the rationale of every command it has included within its folds. Here the Quran informs us that what is given in the Quran is based on knowledge, and its rationale can be understood if we use our intellect and reasoning. Another point over here is that when we go through the Quran, in fact, it expands the horizon of our consciousness, because as we gain more knowledge and the rationale behind that knowledge, our vision, our outlook expands. We go to the next verse, 33. Adam is endowed with the ability to acquire knowledge and to characterize the things of the universe. Qala ya Adamu ambehum bi asma'ihim falamma ambahum bi asma'ihim qala alam aqul lakum inni alamu ghaib as-samawati wal ardi wa alamu ma tubduna wa ma kuntum taktumun. When in this way the first glimpse of the latent human potentials appeared before them, it was said to them that we know about the universe and about the creation being created in it, all of that which remains hidden from your sights. So over here, Quran is presenting Adam before the universal forces who had questioned his existence on the planet Earth. On the other hand, we also know that which is being manifested from you and what your latent characteristics are, the manifestation of which will be through the human hands. Becoming aware of our latent potentials is part of human self-development. This verse points to the manifestation of characterization by Adam in order to bring out the aspect of choice and intent and the latent potential of acquisition of knowledge by man. The Malaika here accept that they do not possess this ability with which man has been endowed, and hence Adam becomes superior in his status in the universe. Here another aspect of the divinity is added by saying that Allah knows about the unseen in the universe. This means that Adam will be provided with guidance towards these aspects in order to explore the treasures kept within the earth. So that means human beings have been given this ability, this inquisitiveness, this curiosity within them, which they can utilize in order to find out what is not known to them for their own benefits in the world and of course for the benefits of everyone else. The common translation of Wa'lamu ma tubduna wa ma kuntum taktumun is that I, that is Allah, know what you reveal and what you conceal. This means that Allah has knowledge of both the latent side of the things of the universe and also knows what these manifest. In relation to man, this includes all that man has discovered so far and whatever more is waiting to be discovered through human efforts. And Quran has pointed to this aspect in some verses that there is so much to be discovered on this planet that human beings need to explore it and never give up. Verse 34, Malaika are asked to prostrate before Adam, i.e. become available for his use through his choice and intent, but his own unbridled emotions rebelled. وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And up to now we should be create some kind of an imagination and a picture within our own mind that there are Malaika, there is the creation of Adam and what is going on between Malaika, Adam and Allah. And Allah is now explaining to Malaika that this Adam who is created has tremendous abilities and potentials and you should come to terms with that because now the stage has reached where these Malaika are now being placed under the control of Adam for living his life on the planet Earth. At this, the universal forces, that is Malaika, bowed down in front of man. But there was one such entity which refused to bow down in front of him. So over here, Allah has asked these Malaika that now they should subjugate themselves to the service of Adam, because Adam has been given the ability of choice and intent. And there is no point of giving choice and intent if certain forces, certain powers are not placed within his control. It shows transgression. These were the emotions of man himself, by becoming overwhelmed with which his intellect and reasoning become suspended, and despite possessing so many powers, he becomes handicapped through his own hands. And as a result, despair engulfs him from all directions. And this is an important aspect of this verse, that it was Iblees, that is his own emotions, his own sentiments, his own unbridled intellect and desires which rebelled. And Quran says over here, Aba wastakbara wa kana minal kafirin, that he became arrogant, he became proud, he became egoistic, and as a result, this led him towards becoming kafir or to display kufr. That rather than making use of these forces which were being placed under him and using these for the good of whole of mankind, he started accumulating these and concentrated into few hands. Next is self-development includes understanding the human psyche in detail. And this is another aspect which comes out of this verse. After possessing all the latent potentials for characterizing the things of the universe, the potential to control the universal forces kept within Adam is now highlighted. And we can see the display of it at least in the last few centuries. The verse relates this aspect to Allah himself, that he directed the Malaika to place the control, and the term used is Sajda, of their properties under Adam, so that he can make use of these during his finite stay on the planet. This ability to harness the forces of nature points to the careful planning and organization which has gone into the creation of Adam. So these verses also tell us that how much planning has gone into the creation of Adam. That is, prior to his arrival, all means of sustenance have been kept in this planet. and also all the forces and powers which can be made available to Adam, both visible as well as invisible, so that he can employ his choice and intent. And his appearance on the planet. So far, man has benefited from a number of discoveries in the fields of various sciences through the use of these potentials. And we can witness this in the world of 2025 and, of course, in the last few centuries. The next part of the verse points to the aspect of the human emotive makeup, which is referred to with the name of Iblees, and of course the word Shaitan will come subsequently. Adam is cautioned here in a metaphorical style to remain aware of this aspect, which may cause him problems in the domain of his psyche. And we can see the display of this Iblisiyat in the character of these human beings who are not guided by the Quran. This emotive makeup has the potential to be a proclivity towards arrogance, egoism, and haughtiness, and which, if not brought under control by man, will lead to the emergence of his behavior of kufr. Next is verse 35, general guidance provided to Adam. وَقُلْنَا يَا آدَمُ اسْكُنْ أَنْتَ وَزَوْجُكَ الْجَنَّةَ وَكُلَا مِنْهَا رَغَدًا حَيْثُ شِئْتُمَا وَلَا تَقْرَبَا هَٰذِهِ الشَّجَرَةَ فَتَكُونَا مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Now begins the collective life of Adam. Previously, we can say that individual is being addressed, and now as an entity which comes together to live on this planet. With these abilities, man and of course woman is placed in the world. The map of his initial life was such that his needs were very limited and there was a great abundance of the means of sustenance. And we can stretch our imagination that if few people are living on this planet, then whole of the planet is available to them as means of sustenance. And there are no borders drawn, there are no visas, there are no passports, man can go anywhere. Hence, there was no mutual tussle or conflict, nor differences or parties. All human beings are living together like one brotherhood. Hence, it was said to them that if you instigate mutual differences, then this paradisiacal life will become snatched from you. And leaving aside the higher aims of life, you will become involved in the hardships of life for the acquisition of the means of sustenance. And this is a very important point coming out of this verse, that basic needs of human beings as far as sustenance, physical sustenance is concerned, must be met for man to aspire for higher aims of life. And in this way will do injustice to your own selves through your own hands. So the word used over here is shajara, and we will go through it briefly. وَلَا تَقْرَبَا هَٰذِهِ الشَّجَرَةَ شَجَرَةَ فَتَكُونَا مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. And that means this was such a situation, this was something which caused man to become unjust to himself. Next slide is Adam is enjoined to stay united and to not divide into parties. This verse now takes man to another important aspect of his psyche at an individual level and its impact on his collective social life. Here Adam and his equal companion and Zawj are informed that by virtue of possessing a biological body, they will abide under the Jannat-like conditions on planet Earth. No distinction of yours and mine had yet appeared. So in Jannat, what happens is there's no distinction of yours and mine. Everyone benefits from the means of sustenance and keeps the higher aims of life in front. The major feature of this Jannat-like life was that they could live anywhere and eat anywhere. We should just imagine that if this situation appears today, for example, this is major property or characteristics of the implementation of the deen of Allah. There was no restriction of any kind on the use of the earthly resources. And that is the beauty of Jannat, which Quran wants us to create on the planet Earth. Essential prerequisite for human self-development. So self-development can only take place once the basic needs of human beings are met, and then they are presented with a higher aim of life. Here the first divine guidance was provided, where after having been cautioned about their emotive makeup, they are told not to divide themselves, and that is where the word shajar has appeared. Shajar also means tree, where there is one stem at the bottom and then it subdivides itself into various branches at the top. So similar situation can arise. The Quran is pointing our attention to that similar situation can arise if you divide yourself. So don't divide yourself, because that will cause problems for you, and this Jannat of yours will turn into Jahannam. If they resort to divisions among themselves, this will lead to the emergence of differences and will affect their mutual harmony, leading to fragmentation and dissensions in their collective life. What will be its effect? They will do injustice to themselves, and as a result, they will lose their earthly life of paradise. And there is a connection of psyche with the outer world. We can see that if they are inwardly divided and the differences appear within their own self as well as collectively, then their outer world will convert into some kind of a hell where there will be problems everywhere. And we can witness that in the world of 2025. Next is 36. Adam gets himself expelled from the life of paradise through his unbridled emotions and mutual wrangling. فَأَزَلَّهُمَا الشَّيْطَانُ عَنْهَا فَأَخْرَجَهُمَا مِمَّا كَانَا فِيهِ وَقُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌّ وَلَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُسْتَقَرٌّ وَمَتَاعٌ إِلَىٰ حِينٍ. Now we can see that there are gaps between these verses. One verse then goes on to the next point, then those blanks we should be filling up ourselves by observing at the world around us and by looking at our own psyche as well as the psyche of our fellow human beings. Because Quran over here is presenting before us the creation of Adam and the kind of issues which Adam is likely to face as he lives his life under the guidance of the Quran and without the guidance of the Quran. So far we are going through those aspects which are unguided. That is, the man is living life under his own unbridled desires and intellect. Now over here, the Quran has introduced Shaitan. First it said Iblees and then is Shaitan. And Iblees is that side of human beings where they become hopeless about the guidance from Allah. They think that it is their own intellect and desires which can guide them, and as a result they land up into problems and then become hopeless. Those are the effects of following the wrong path. And Shaitan over here means their own unbridled desires, their impulsiveness, their egoistic proclivities. And Shaitan also means the one who is hinderer in the path of Allah. That is, he is the one who creates obstacles on the path of Allah. But the emotions of individual self-interest got hold of man as well as woman, and he started to live his communal life according to his own created system. That is, man was told to live in a collective brotherhood and share everything, all the resources present on the earth, and do not draw lines on the planet. As a consequence of this, his both paradisiacal life became snatched from him. Man became divided into different parties, and one party became the enemy of the other party. The wedges of self-interest became imposed among them. And that is another important point, is aduwan. And Quran has pointed to this right at the beginning, that man will create these wedges among themselves when they will not think at a higher level and do not become human beings and then start looking for guidance and come within the domain of the wahi of Allah. But the human life in the world was not a matter of 1 or 2 days. And this is another interesting aspect, that it is not a very short life. Even if it is a finite life on this planet, it is spread over many, many decades. That it would have served the purpose like this. He had to live here for a period of time, and everyone had to benefit from the means of sustenance. Was there no solution for this self-created trouble of man? Another aspect we should keep in mind when we are looking at these verses is not to look at these as individuals, but also collectively. While as individuals we may have a limited life in terms of years, let's say about 80 to 100 years nowadays, but that does not mean that collectively the life is far longer than an individual life. So whatever actions collectively we take, we should look at the overall length of the time human beings are going to be on this planet. Because what we do now, we are going to affect the future generations. And it is our responsibility today that we live a better world for our future generations. So a lot comes out of this verse, which we need to look at in more detail in our own time. Next slide is human unbridled emotions lead to causing dissonances and inner conflicts. See, right at the beginning, the Quran is pointing to this aspect. Here, Shaitan appears on the scene, which is another facet of human emotive constitution. So, Iblees and Shaitan both are the two sides of the same coin. These point to our emotional makeup and how our intellect interacts with our emotions. Under the influence of Shaitan, man tends to follow his unbridled desires and as a result causes imbalance in collective life. The Quran has noted that both Adam and his companions come to the influence of Shaitan, which led to their exit from the state of Jannat, and they descended into a lower level of existence, and Quran calls it ihbitu. And it's another interesting aspect over here is that the Quran is not holding only man responsible or woman responsible, but both, because both represent Adam, both represent mankind. So that aspect we should keep in mind, unlike the religious texts where they accuse man or woman depending on how they view things. But Quran is treating both equally and saying that this is your world, both of you have to live together and both of you possess the same self. And when you lower yourself, that means both man and woman have the proclivities, have the trait to lower themselves or to raise their own eminence. As a consequence of this state of decision making, a situation of conflict arose, and Quran has called it aduwan, i.e., a wedge became created among them. This is the consequence of obeying their base desires, which lead to the creation of differences and conflicts on earth. We can see the display of this in the world of 2025. Another important evidence-based fact is noted here, fil ardi mustaqarrun wa mata'un ilahin. The earth will serve as the place of abode in this phase of Adam's collective life. Because human beings possess a physical self, so the earth is very conveniently and very nicely presented to man with all the facilities for a physical being to live on this planet, with a lot of variety of different topography and different regions of the world. However, this will be finite, i.e., for a defined time, that is, it will follow the physical law. There will be the means of livelihood, and Quran has called it mata'un. And mata'un is referred to those means of livelihood which are enough for a journey. So the Quran is saying that on this planet, you will be journeying through your life. In fact, when we look at the way Earth moves around the sun, it is also on a journey around the sun. So we should keep that in mind as students of the Quran, that our life is meant to be a journey and not permanence, that we are not going to stay on this planet forever. There will be the means of livelihood placed in the earth for man to complete his earthly life. So it is the self which we need to develop rather than fully focused on the physical side of our existence. The procedure of Tawbah outlined, verse 37. فَتَلَقَّى آدَمُ مِنْ رَبِّهِ كَلِمَاتٍ فَتَابَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّهُ هُوَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ. Because human beings, in these verses, Quran has pointed to the factor of doing injustice to themselves. That is, they divided themselves. As a result, they created problems for themselves, as Malaika had pointed out in the verse 30. There was a solution available for this, but this was not within the remit of his intellect. The human intellect can convey the paths of protection to every man for his self-interest, but cannot articulate the method of peace and security to universal humanity. This was only possible through that ideology and system of life which can become available from the direction of Allah via wahi. So man couldn't figure out himself that why did he do what he did on the planet Earth and made his life hell. and by adopting which he could acquire the same paradisiacal life. Commonplace translation of this verse is, then learned Adam from his Rabb words of inspiration, and his Rabb turned towards him, for he is oft returning, most merciful. Next slide is, understanding Tawbah is a part of self-development. Now between verse 36 and 37, we need to fill in the blank by referring to our own practical life on the planet. Having suffered at the hands of his own unbridled desires and emotions, there is bound to be some regret and disappointment. That is the aspect of Iblees, created in the heart and mind of man. And here the Quran refers to the fact that he is provided with some recourse in order to rectify this plight by Allah. That is why Allah is Alim and Hakim as Rabb. And that is why we have also to become Alim and Hakim in order to deal with our collective issues of life. This is a beautiful verse which points to the aspect of reverting to the correct path after getting lost. And this is what Tawbah means, that the point or the crossroad from where we have gone wrong, and if we have realized that we are on the wrong path, we should go back to the same crossroad and then take the correct direction as per the guidance. And creating a desire to seek guidance. It is part of Rububiyat to learn from mistakes using the guidance of Wahi, and to never return to the wrong path of Iblees and Shaitan by keeping in mind the consequences. And that is the important point aspect coming out of this verse, is that on every crossroad of life, we should keep in mind the consequences of going in the wrong direction. Because when we go in the wrong direction, we not only lose time, we also suffer because of our physical fatigue and strain of following the wrong path. And of course, there is a lot of stress involved in that as well. That is why Quran says that right at the beginning, on every crossroad of life, come to the Quran and make the correct decisions. The verse concludes with two divine attributes, Innahu huwa tawwabur rahim. The root meaning of at-tawwab is to return. Man is at-taib, while Allah is at-tawwab, i.e. the one who returns to this man swiftly. And there's another very important point implicit over here, is that when we take the wrong path and we have traveled a long distance and then we come back to the point where we made a mistake and took the wrong direction, the Quran is saying that all that time and energy which you wasted, Allah being at-Tawwab can erase that if you follow the path of the Quran. But it has to be done within the time of respite available to us. For example, if we are terminally ill and are about to leave this world, then we will not have enough time to counter the effects of wrongdoing in the world. After the realization of having stepped in a wrong direction, to return to the point where one has gone wrong is called Tawbah. Taking the correct direction and its benefits as per the guidance of Allah falls under Ar-Rahim. And this is the beauty over here, that after At-Tawwab, the divine attribute of Ar-Rahim is mentioned, which is part of our development and growth on this path called Sirat-e-Mustaqim. The system of Deen will have this included in the education, training and self-development of all members of the society. This will form part of the legal system under Ad-Deen. So a lot of subclauses will have to be figured out under this verse. Now we come to the last verse of today's presentation, verse 38. The importance of divine guidance is underscored. قُلْ نَهْبِطُوا مِنْهَا جَمِيعًا فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُم مِّنِّي هُدًى فَمَن تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Consequently, when that paradisiacal life became snatched from him, that is both man and woman, it was announced to him that for you there is no need to sink into despair. Even if all of you get onto the wrong path, even then there is nothing to become hopeless about it. So there is no reason to become Iblis. The Quran is saying that there is hope for you, because all these aspects have been kept within you, that if you make mistakes, you can always come back if you have still time of respite available to you. The guidance will keep arriving towards you from our direction via our messengers. Those people who will live life according to this guidance will remain protected from every kind of fear and grief. Fear and grief become addressed. In this verse, the Quran has described the consequence of going against the guidance which landed mankind into a lower status, which is ihbitu, due to becoming divided and due to mutual enmity, the consequence of following personal unbridled desires. So the Quran is telling us that don't think that this life is static. This life is very dynamic, and with each passing day, we are actually heading towards our physical demise from this world. And at the same time, the kind of choices we are making, that is affecting ourselves. So our collective life is dynamic, as well as there is a lot going on within our own self. Here another important aspect of the human psyche is implied, which points to the despair and hopelessness which may follow after man ends up in conflict and chaos. The Quran urges man not to despair, that there is a way out of your predicament, and that Allah's laws do cater for rescue and reformation. Allah has the responsibility to provide guidance as Rabb, that is as part of his system of Rububiyat, to every part of his creation, and in the case of man, this will be made available via Wahi through his messengers, so that man can use his intellect and choice to accept this guidance. If this guidance, which is now preserved in the Quran, is followed after accepting it rationally, and that is very important, we should never ever accept the Quranic guidance blindly, because then we are not using our intellect. The whole point of rationally going through the Quran is to use our intellect and our emotions rationally, so that it affects our sense of identity, our self, our I, so that we learn from it and expand our consciousness. Then this will remove all ill effects of human errors committed prior to coming to the Quran. Here the Quran has pointed to another important fact of the state of human affairs devoid of the Quran. A state of fear and grief will exist in the land among human beings, and we can see that fear all around us, because people in power actually want to create fear in which others live so that they can control them. And that is something very interesting, that over here Quran is pointed to that if you go towards the guidance of the Quran, then there will be no fear in your world, and you will also not suffer from any kind of anxiety, grief, because your system will be based on the permanent values of the Quran, where the sustenance of everyone will be adequately met. And you will go back to the same Jannat which was available to Adam right at the beginning. However, if the guidance is followed, then this state of fear and grief will become removed and lead to peace and tranquility. And both peace and tranquility are related to human self-development. Finally, last slide, a summary. These 9 verses set the scene for us to understand the basis of the creation of Adam, that is man and woman as equals, and what we should expect from the finite physical existence on earth. These point briefly to the existence of choice and intent, that is through our I or ourself, the universal forces made available to man, the potential to characterize things of the universe, the rebellious proclivities termed as Iblees and Shaitan within the psyche of man, to become aware of the divisive inclination which can affect our collective social life. Each of these points which are raised over here through these verses, we can relate to our own self, and we can also relate to the world around us. It is also pointed out to man that his life on the planet is meant to be collective while maintaining his strong sense of identity and individuality. And this is a very interesting system which the Quran has presented, that despite living a collective life physically in this world, you will simply cannot lose your own identity and your own self-consciousness. And we can see that because our sense of identity is so strong. Firstly, it doesn't change as we live our life, that is, our thoughts don't grow old. And secondly, we know that we exist, and we also know how we exist in relation to fellow human beings. He's informed right at the outset that he should not end up creating mutual enmity and imbalances through his decision making. Very important that as we live our life, we should make sure that there's no mutual enmity and imbalances, at least at an individual level, we are creating as students of the Quran, because that is where understanding of the guidance of the Quran lies. Also implicit in this metaphorical account is the accountability of man's decision making, and he is informed about Tawbah and the law of requital. These verses point to the careful planning which has gone into the creation of man and his stay on earth for a finite period of time. Then the Quran advises man that if he decides to live under the domain of his unbridled desires and intellect, then his world will consist of fear and grief. However, if he wishes to extricate himself from this state of affairs in his world, then he needs only to follow the guidance of Allah made available from the start and which is now preserved in the Quran for all times. So man has been provided with choice, very clear choice, that which path he wishes to follow individually as well as collectively as part of the collective system in the world. The Quran here presents this tangible choice before man. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.